Welcome to your iconic image. If you want to take control of your image and be a power player in your space, then this is the show for you. Here we will arm you with tools and information to help you grow your brand on purpose. I'm your host, Marlana Semenza, photographer and visual strategist. Now let's dive into today's episode. Lisa Kipps-Brown helps entrepreneurs solve big picture problems with disruptive strategic thinking and no gobbledygook. She is also the author of the book, Disrupt Your Now. Welcome, Lisa.
Hello, Marlana. It's so good to see you. Thanks for having me.
So today we're going to talk about getting out of your own way, because I think that's a problem that most of us have at some point or another, sometimes multiple times. So why do you think we do that to ourselves?
I think a big part of it is that we just overthink everything, and not just entrepreneurs, but everybody. But, if you think about it, you can usually give other people better advice than they can give themselves. And then at the same time, you're screwing up your own life or you're making poor decisions. And I just think that we're so close to our own problems that we can't see the forest for the trees.
So do you think that it's even possible for us to recognize that we're putting these roadblocks up for ourselves, or not always?
I'm sure that some people do. And I know that I do. But even when I know I'm doing it, a lot of times I still am like totally lost on what I should be doing. Because once again, it's just like we're just so close to it. You know how, like a painting, if you stand really close and you only see a small part, you're not seeing the whole thing. And then you back up and you see the entire vision. And you're like, oh, and I really think that's what it is. But last weekend at Brandon Strauss's 3C Coach event, we talked about this topic a lot. And every single person there has the problem. And I mean, I've been an entrepreneur for 31 years, and I've owned my current business for 26. And there are other people there who've been in business for decades. We're all the same. So if anybody out there is feeling like a weirdo or a loser, you're just normal.
So is it better for us to have somebody kind of, give us that bird's eye view, so to speak?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made in my own entrepreneurial career is not having a coach earlier. I kind of always looked at a coach as rah, rah, you can do this. And I'm like, I understand business and I don't need any motivation. I don't need all that. But what I didn't understand is, in pro sports, even Tiger Woods has a coach. Hello, he knows how to play golf. He still needs a coach to help him dial in on the very small points. And that's what I realized. That's why I started working with Steve Sims at the end of 2018. Oh my God, it's been 3 years. But yeah, Steve's the first coach I ever had. And I would highly recommend a coach and or coaches, and also masterminds to listeners.
So in your opinion, what will a good coach do?
A good coach it's kind of like a therapist. They're not going to tell you what to do. They will give you advice and so forth, but more than that, they'll kind of help you discover yourself and they'll ask the right questions to help draw out of you what you may know about yourself, but you may not be consciously aware of. And they will, sometimes they will help you advice-wise, actually help you formulate steps and so forth. But I really do look at them more as a therapist and more as somebody to force you to take that step back, and to also for accountability. Because, hey, let's face it, it's really easy to have a to-do list, and at the end of the list, half the stuff hasn't gotten done. And so having a coach who's going to sit there and go, did you do what you were supposed to do? It makes it a little bit more critical that you get it done, because you don't want to get fussed at.
So what is kind of the difference between them and an accountability partner?
Well, an accountability partner to me is more a peer, like maybe your same level, and you each are telling each other what you want to achieve and then helping each other make sure they do it. A coach should be somebody well above your level. And as a matter of fact, as you progress, you should continue to move on to other coaches. Doesn't mean that you have to ditch the one that you're currently working with. A lot of people I know have multiple coaches, but you need to be working with someone who's well above you in the food chain so that they will push you to think differently and at a different level of success than you may be thinking of. And when I speak of success, I'm not talking just money. I'm more into a full life and living life. I look at it as, why be an entrepreneur if you can't live life like you want it? That's why money isn't the main thing for me. For some people it is. Maybe they just want to build something up really fast that they can sell. There's nothing wrong with it, but you should always have a coach who is several levels higher than you.
In the people that you've encountered and worked with, do you see the same situations arise over and over again?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And somebody will come in and they'll have a problem or a complaint, and we'll think we get it resolved. And what happens is there'll be a different problem or complaint that they have with themselves later. And what they don't understand is it's all caused by the same thing. And hey, I am the worst at that. And that's why I recognize it in other people. I'm really bad about having my list of things that I'm going to do and letting something blow that up. And that should never be like that. I don't know. I think mine is kind of middle child syndrome, wanting to keep everything. But so I'm bad about doing that, but I'm also really bad about getting focused too much on some small detail that really doesn't matter, and being a perfectionist and overworking it. And it's a total waste of time because nothing will ever be perfect. Those are the two ways that I get in my own way the most.
It seems like perfectionism comes up for a lot of people.
Yeah. And a lot of times people think that they're a procrastinator. I used to think I was. I'm like, why am I such a loser? Why do I procrastinate so much? And I realized it's not really procrastination. It's more fear of not being perfect. So it's like, I'm kind of like, or I'm getting better about it. If I can't do it perfect, I don't want to do it at all. So, or I'll put off getting started on something because of kind of that subliminal fear of failure. Not that I really think whatever I'm going to do is going to end up being terrible. I don't think that, but that it won't be as perfect as the level I hold myself to.
So how have you gotten past that?
Just really, really trying to be conscious of my own thoughts. I equate it kind of like someone who's on a diet, or not on a diet, but somebody who complains about not being able to lose weight. It's like, slow down, chew, taste your food, because a lot of people eat really fast and they swallow and they never even really enjoyed what they were eating. They don't taste it. So it's kind of like the same thing for me. Take a step back. What am I thinking about? What am I feeling? And trying to figure out. And I know this sounds like all psychobabble. I'm not into psychobabble at all. I'm like totally no BS. So I don't mean it like that, but it really does help if you can try to get in tune with what you're actually feeling and thinking.
Do you think a lot of people too are constantly looking to the next thing and not enjoying where they are right now?
Yeah, I do think that. And I also think a lot of we entrepreneurs have shiny object syndrome. It's just so easy to go, oh my God, that is perfect. And if I just do that, everything is going to be awesome. And then you set off down this road towards nothing again. And so what happens is you end up scattered all over the place instead of sticking to one thing. I'll give you an example, though, of how the perfectionism thing really affected me recently, if you'd like.
Yes.
So when I was writing the book, Disrupt Your Now, I tend to be a lone ranger. The last book I wrote before this one, I wrote in 3 days because everything was already in my head and I just had to get it out. So this one, I not only was writing it with someone else, I had a coach Steve, who is, watching me. So that's pressure. And then I ended up interviewing 50 entrepreneurs in it. So all of a sudden, I didn't even realize I was feeling it. I just felt like I was having a meltdown. I didn't understand what was wrong. But I realized that I was afraid, what if all these people who were involved in the book after it came out were like, this is crap. I wish I weren't in it, or didn't think it was up to par. And I really freaked myself out. And thankfully I had a friend around, because, I'm married, my husband could have done it, but typically spouses and significant others, it's hard for them to do because, you just have all that stuff in between you. So thankfully my friend was here, and she, peeled me up off the floor and gave me a good talking to and got my head on straight. And that, though, was a peer. That's like what you're talking about, an accountability partner. That's where an accountability partner will come in great.
So now that you brought it up, tell us about Disrupt Your Now. What's it about? Who's it for?
So it's called Disrupt Your Now, the Successful Entrepreneur's Guide to Reimagining Your Business and Life. And you know how you meet entrepreneurs all the time. They may be very successful. They have the right cars, they live in the right houses and everything, but they are miserable. To the outside world, they may seem like they have it made, but they just are miserable. It may be because of time, or they may feel trapped. They may be broke, because a lot of times we're not as financially successful as we are because we've overdone it. This book is for those people, to help them figure out what it is they really want out of life so they can use their business to help them get it. So the book evolved over time. It ended up nothing like I had envisioned it was going to be initially, but I love what it ended up being. It's kind of like a bathroom book for business. It's a whole bunch of short stories, and you could pick it up and start reading anywhere if you want to. It's not like something that you have to read from the beginning to the end. The other thing I really like about it is that I have entrepreneurs of all stripes. I have people from Steve Sims, the real life Wizard of Oz, and Jeffrey Madoff, who owns the premier video production company in New York City. He has clients you may recognize, like Ralph Lauren and Tiffany and Company. And Ralph Lauren has been his client for 35 years. So really, really high level entrepreneurs, down to, I have a teenager who's on the autism spectrum and has owned a business for 3 years, and a guy who spent 15 years in prison for armed robbery. Wow. So there are people of all stripes, because I wanted people to come away and realize, if they did it, I can do it. And if everybody is hugely successful, people tend to focus on what their life is like now, not what it was when they were scraping up.
So all these people are actually people who have gotten out of their own way.
Exactly. Yes. And that's what a lot of the stories are what was going wrong and how did they figure out, how did they get out of their own way to do it? So a lot of it, even if it doesn't explicitly say that, that's kind of what's going on.
Is there a common thread to a lot of the stories?
The biggest common thread to me is to always be ready for opportunity and learn to recognize it, because the greatest opportunity in the world can come along, but if you're not ready for it, you can't seize it. Like if you meet the right person or if the right project comes along. So you have to really dial in on what you want, learn the most that you can about it, become a real expert. And you have to learn how to recognize opportunity, because it's not just going to come up and knock on your door and go, hey, I'm opportunity. Do you want me? It usually the biggest opportunities that people in the book came across were things they weren't even expecting. They weren't even looking for, but somewhere along the way, they had prepared themselves to be ready for that moment in time and to recognize it.
So what do you think the difference is between opportunity and shiny object syndrome?
Well, shiny object syndrome is more when I kind of look at it as more a bit of that procrastination, but it's when you know what you need to do, you know what you're going after, but all of a sudden it's usually more of a tool or an app. It's like, oh my God, here's this awesome app, here's this awesome social media platform. If I just start using this and use it all the time, then I'm going to be this huge success, rather than focusing on the thing on our end goal. I'm not telling people to never change their course and their vision and all that, because I'm a big believer in constantly evolving. My business has never been the same year to year. When I started it, I had 2 babies and was caring for an Alzheimer's patient. So my life back then was a lot different than it was 12 years ago when my kids were moving out and growing up. But right when I was positioned for everything to be about me, then my mother got Alzheimer's and I became her caregiver. So that's one of the main reasons I started my business, was so that I could shift and make it fit my life. So that was a great question. I want people out there to be able to differentiate between shiny object syndrome, which is just a distraction that's delaying you, versus taking stock of where you're at and making an informed decision on some kind of shift or pivot.
It seems like in there that knowing what our core values are, things like that, and what our hard no's are will also help eliminate some of that.
Yes, and that's why I start the book out with you. You, the reader. I have it broken up into 5 sections, and the first section is you. What do you want out of life? What is important to you? What motivates you? What are your core values? And also, what are your weaknesses? How can you take your weaknesses and turn them into strengths? The second part goes out a little bit, like to your network and the people around you who you surround yourself with, and learning to recognize opportunity. The third part is more about learning to think creatively and think differently. Fourth is about more of the actual operations, like delegation and stuff. And then the last part is about a higher purpose, about business being more than money. Because, if money were the answer to everything, we wouldn't see all these wealthy people with all these problems. So at the end of the day, when you reach your goal financially, you still have to live with yourself. You're still the same person, and you still have your same problems, except maybe not financially. So you have to understand what you really, really want, so that you'll be happy being with yourself.
How important do you think that it is to set your goal and know what your goal is in getting out of your own way?
Well, as far as goal personally, I think to understand yourself, know what you want out of life, that is immensely important. Until you know what you want, and it's not like it has to be X amount of money or whatever, but just know the values, the things that are hard no's for you. I'm not willing to sacrifice whatever these things are. And then on the flip side, these are the things that I really would love to have. And if I could ever have them, this would be wonderful. So that's really important. But then within the business itself, yes, you have to have goals. You have to know where you're going. You need to have short-term goals, midterm, and long-term goals, because if you don't know where you're going, you won't know when you get there. And you'll just meander all over the place. If you know where you're going, then you can constantly take stock of whether you are on the right path. Nick Peterson has a book called Bumpers that I love. N-I-C Peterson, not N-I-C-K. It's called Bumpers. And it was just a brain dump. He did not mean for it to become a book, but his friends were like, well, we're going to make it into a book if you're not. And he recommends, like in a bowling alley, how you can put bumpers on each side so that you can't go too far either way. He recommends that you do that in your own life. And I was like, this is brilliant. Why did I never think of it? So he says, if you have a great day where you have reached your goals or exceeded them, stop. Where most of us are like, oh, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep charging. And what ends up is that usually ends up biting you in the ass. Sorry, but whatever. Sorry, I don't know if I could say that, but it comes back to bite you. So he says, don't overdo it when things are going great. But on the flip side, when things are going wrong, realize where you are and stop yourself from going further down the wrong track. That has really helped me since I read his book a couple months ago, because I have these figurative bumpers in my mind, almost visually, and I can kind of gauge myself how far I am from each side.
That's great. So if somebody listens to this episode and gets nothing else out of it, what would you like them to take away from this?
It's your business and you can make it anything you want.
Love it. Okay, Lisa, 4 final questions for you then.
Okay.
The first one is, what's the best piece of advice you were ever given?
It's okay to say no. I used to be a yes person in my personal life and business. And I do think that's a real middle child thing. And I finally learned it's okay to say no. And I actually hurt some people by not saying no.
Yeah. And it's also okay for no to be a complete sentence.
Yes. Yes. That's another great point, Marlana.
Share with us one thing on your bucket list.
To through hike the Appalachian Trail.
Oh.
I don't know if I'll ever do it, but it's always been a dream of mine.
And, you know, while we're on bucket lists and things like that, I know you have some other exciting things going on. You want to tell anybody about some of the other things you have going on?
Yeah, well, I work with a NASCAR driver. Our mission is to combat veteran suicide. And this coming weekend, we have the first Braille paint scheme in NASCAR and the first blind-owned sponsor. I'm so excited. PhD chemist, Dr. Hoby Wedler. He is not a veteran, but you know, anything that we do to help veterans helps everybody because you know it's a cross section of all demographics. And my father was blind. Hoby and I met. We became great friends. We're collaborating on a lot of stuff. So we're promoting accessibility. The hashtag access saves lives, because if you have access to what you need, whether it's education, training, funding, food, clothing, a house, if you have access to those things, you're much less likely to commit suicide. My grandfather killed himself when I was 5, and my grandmother tried to when I was 8. So it's a cause that's really important to me. My husband's retired Navy, so that's another connection. And then with me and Hoby, my dad, I can't remember if I already said this, my dad was blind. So Hoby and I just have this real deep connection with each other.
Yeah, and if anybody hasn't figured this out yet, Lisa is multi-layered.
Yeah.
So when the toy companies finally get around to making an action figure of you, what 2 accessories will it come with?
Okay, the first would be 3D glasses. And people are probably like, what? Well, that's because I just see things differently. I see, and I think now, and I'm not sure if I'm answering the question the way you wanted it to, but I see it as like if I were with somebody and I had to be an action figure to save them, I would put on my 3D glasses and I would figure out how to get them out of the problem instead of like bash, bang, boom, you know, that I would do it with my mind. And then secondly, it would be an infinite supply of food and toys for all the pets that I end up adopting. They all end up at our house somehow. So
love that. And last one, Lisa, how do people find you?
My website is lisakipps-brown.com, LISAKIPPSBROWN.com. And I'm Lisa Kipps-Brown on pretty much all social media platforms out there.
And as far as the book, what's the best way to go about getting the book if somebody would like to read into it?
Well, it's on Amazon. The name is Disrupt Your Now, or you can go to disruptyournow.com and there's a dedicated page on my website. You'll be able to see a couple dozen of the people who are in the book and link over and find out more about them. And I'm also working on a companion workbook. That won't be out for another month or 2. But yeah, go to disruptyournow.com and that will also link you over to Amazon if you want to get it. And if you do get it, please do a review, whether you hate it or whether you like it. I really want to know what people like of it. I mean, what people think of it.
Love it. Thanks so much, Lisa, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Marlana. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. Once again, I'm Marlana Semenza, photographer and visual strategist. Please comment, like, or share this episode, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. For more information on how I can help you create your iconic image, visit marlanasemenza.com.